Fine?
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Margriet van Schijndel. I work at the Dutch Research Institute TNO. I'm Secretary General of EAPA, which is an association of research organizations in automotive research. And I'm going to guide you through this executive session this morning. The topic of the session is getting a European payoff from connectivity. And what we see is that already a lot of work has been done on trials and getting systems a little bit on the road, or quite much on the road. Research has been done, and we see getting systems into production. But however, we have gained a lot of knowledge. We don't know yet how we are going to get to a wide deployment of the systems and how we are going to benefit from it. Apart from earning some money for some companies, how is Europe going to be any wiser with having these systems and having a better mobility system? And that's what we're going to discuss now. I won't be doing that, of course, on my own. I have 5 fine panelists with me. And to make the challenge a little bit bigger, it has been decided to have the keynote speech not from Europe, though we're talking about the European payoff from connectivity, but from Australia. And I think we should really see it as a challenge to cooperate in connectivity and to learn from each other. And I hope, Susan, that that's what we're going to do. Susan Harris is our keynote speaker, and she's built a career in consultancy and industry on collaborative solutions with government, industry, and academia. And I think that collaboration might be key to what we're discussing also here today. Furthermore, Susan is very well embedded in the national and international ITS world and being CEO of ITS Australia. Susan, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here this morning, and I'm really looking forward to, I think there are not so many differences to the challenges that we face, whether it be in Europe, whether it be in Australia or in other parts of the world. So I'm really looking forward to having a discussion about how we do get this payoff and providing a bit of context for what we're doing in Australia, in particular in this space. And I think there's always learnings to be held as to how we can share information and ideas. So I'm just going to give a very brief introduction this morning ahead of our great panellists and a more engaged discussion. So what I wanted to particularly touch on this morning was looking at the payoff from connectivity from the perspective of safety and what we're doing in that space. Looking at freight in Australia, that's a particular challenge for us, and some areas where we have some quite significant innovations to share. And then also looking at connectivity and road pricing, the thinking that we have in that space and how we're leveraging emerging and current technology to look at road pricing and how that's assisting in getting a payoff from this connected world that we're in. So firstly, looking at the safety perspective, I think it's really important that we don't forget about the basics. We have had telematics services around for many, many years now, but they're getting increasingly sophisticated with better sensing devices and with better connectivity, whether it be over the mobile network or the satellite network. So one of the companies in particular that I wanted to highlight today is an Australian organisation, Seeing Machines, started as a small startup in Canberra, and they have a great technology which enables them to monitor the eyes of the driver. So it's very non-invasive technology, and they've been very effective initially out in the mining sector, on vehicles in the mining sector, and I think they now have their technology embedded in Caterpillar technology that's out in the Caterpillar machinery, but then moving more generally into the freight sector. And now their technology is of great interest in the general automotive sector, as the automotive industry aims to make sure that drivers are actually paying attention, as increasingly the car is doing more and more for the drivers. So this enables the manufacturers to be confident that the drivers are monitoring the road and paying attention as the manufacturers would like them to be. So particularly in Australia, where we have 1 in 6 fatal crashes that involves drowsy drivers, this is a technology that's having a real cut through, and I think safety is a really important area that we're starting to see this pay off. Congestion is another aspect. I think it's a significant cost in cities around the world, and we're still looking for that magic bullet in terms of how we leverage technology to really get this benefit and manage congestion. We're getting increasingly congested cities, and in Australia we're really focused on managing that congestion so that our cities can remain livable. You might think of Australia as wide open spaces, but we're actually the most urbanised country in the world. So while we have a lot of space, our people live in cities. So congestion is a major issue as we have big urban areas and people wanting to come into the central business area to work each day. So this is an example of some of the costs of congestion in Sydney, not dissimilar to costs in major cities around the world. But 50% of the costs of this congestion are contributed through the costs of freight. So it's really the challenge here is to then look at, well, how do we ease the cost of ease out and make our freight move more effectively to really get to the nub of what this cost of congestion is. So what we're doing in Sydney is we've got 3 major freight corridors that move in and out of the city of Sydney that are heavily congested. So we're looking at Cooperative RTS technology to give priority to freight vehicles. So initially there's 100 vehicles currently, just over 100 vehicles equipped with Cooperative RTS technology, so retrofitted with this technology, and I think around 120 traffic intersections connected with this technology. So that as these vehicles approach the intersections, there's a message goes back to the control centre. The control centre does an assessment to verify whether we can give priority to this freight vehicle without having too much of an adverse impact on traffic elsewhere in the network, and then that vehicle will get a green light and travel smoothly along the corridor on their journey. We have huge distances that we cover in Australia with our freight, so that is one of the major challenges, and anything that we can do to reduce the cost of congestion has a major advantage for the country and our competitive position elsewhere. So what we're seeing in terms of what we're anticipating to see is that the cost of congestion for our freight vehicles, they will have a 20% improved journey time, and we're anticipating that will obviously have an impact in terms of reduced fuel cost, so an environmental benefit as well, perhaps an amenity benefit for residents. Often these are busy roads with housing and community around these busy streets, so if we don't have heavy trucks slowing down at the intersection and then slowly ramping up, that's a benefit for the community as well. It's really interesting to see that what we're anticipating is that we'll not only get a benefit for the heavy freight vehicles, but an even greater benefit for light vehicles that are not having to stop behind the trucks and then slowly ramp up again. So it's really a benefit for traffic and congestion overall. So lastly, I wanted to touch on another really interesting, really important area around road pricing. There's a lot of talk around connected vehicles, automated vehicles, and what we're seeing in that space. And I think it's really important that as we get caught up in that excitement, some of the downside potential is that we have all these empty vehicles running around, looking for parking spots or just cruising around while I'm doing my shopping, heading home while I'm at work, and the increased potential for increased use of vehicles for much wider use applications than what we have today. So in Australia, we have one of our major road owners, Transurban. They're an ASX top 20 company and one of the largest owner of private roads in Australia. They're leading the way in terms of undertaking work to look at really practical steps to understand Australia's driving preferences for road pricing models. So they're investigating. They've provided a team of people with a bucket of money, and depending on which model they're on, they're deducting funds from those drivers. So the models that they're investigating are distance-based per kilometre charge. I think we're all familiar for that. They're also looking at a one-off charge based on anticipated kilometres for the period, and also a cost per trip charge. So they're really leading the way in Australia in terms of understanding the community's propensity to move to a different road pricing model, and to drive the discussion along a different way of looking at how we investigate road charging. So lastly, I'm not going to go through the full detail on this slide, but really just to highlight there is an enormous amount of energy in Australia in this space. So there's a great amount of interest. We're a federation, so it means that we have 7 states that are all engaged separately, dealing with the community, dealing with industry to look at opportunities for the magic payoff of connectivity. And so we're able to then learn from each of the states and roll that technology out and roll the successful commercial models out across Australia as well. So I'm very happy to spend some time after this session or during the session talking about some of the specific projects that are underway. But of course, you are all invited to come to Melbourne in October this year to come and speak to the leaders that are undertaking this work themselves and to come and see for yourself some of the really interesting projects that are underway and being delivered in Melbourne and across Australia. So I'll hand back to the panel and our moderator so that we can continue the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Susan. Thank you. I think we already have some nice examples of some payoff in real world or in trials. Thank you very much for that, Susan. Our next speaker, Claire, is coming originally from the European Parliament area, working on research, ICT and industry. And I hope she took that experience really with her, going to DG MOVE, the Director General MOVE of the European Commission. And since a couple of years, Claire is heading the unit of intelligent transport systems. Furthermore, she's responsible for the CTIS deployment platform. Claire, can you give us some clues on the European payoff? Thank you.
I'll move my ad. Sorry, I'll move my ad for you.
So, welcome everybody. I think I'll start by saying that of course, the CTIS platform is important, but of course, this does not come as the first step. If we have had such a good success through the CTIS platform, it was already because we had a very strong constituency in Europe. European Commission is not managing traffic. European Commission is not dealing immediately with road safety. This is done at national level. This is done at local level. So all the work that we have done through the CTIS platform was because we had with us people who were confronting with this kind of problems at national level, at local level, because we had a strong support from the industry, so we could try to establish a shared vision at European level. And maybe just to add that we were still quite proud, because I think that I'm looking at Gerd, within the 2 first days after the publication of this report, we had more than 3,000 downloads. I think from the European Commission, it's quite a good success. So let me come back to the content now. This CTIS platform report, what is it in the end? It was indeed the attempt to let emerge a shared vision on CTIS. And why so? Because in the end, we wanted to make sure that these new technologies, this new opportunity would serve policy objective, getting the payoff. So not only a toy, but really supporting our road safety policies. We recently published the figures at European level, and I must admit that in the last 2 years, these figures were not as good as we would have expected. So that means that it's not because the trends are going well that you can just, set up and then just leave the effort. On the contrary, we should try to find additional ways to tackle this. And not only fatalities, actually, because in Europe, we have not so much good figures also in terms of severe injuries. So this is absolutely one of the things we should be looking at. The title of this session is Getting the Payoff. So I will just link it also to the work we have done in terms of cost-benefit analysis. Of course, we have been looking at some figures at European level, and these figures were quite good. The more you deploy, the more rapidly you deploy, the more you get benefits. And in terms of cost, so the ratio between the cost and the benefits were 3:1. So clearly, this is the path we should take, enable deployment. The problem, as I mentioned, is that you get this benefit if you move rapidly. So we have to act now, not only us, but with the member states. And this is happening. This is happening, and I link it now with our Dutch presidency, strong impetus to move towards a shared vision, a shared strategy at European level. This was decided, this was endorsed by all 28 member states in April this year. And based on this report of the CTIS platform, where we have established, I would say, quite a strong vision with a lot of very detailed recommendations in terms of security, in terms of data protection, in terms of public acceptance. Again, getting the payoff will come if we manage to have the buy-in from people. And actually, not only from people, but also from the local authorities, where this system will have to be deployed. So, on the one hand, we are so proud of the result, but on the other hand, we know that there's a lot of work to be done still ahead of us. We have launched very recently the second phase of the platform, and I think that, if I can put it that way, we looked very much at enabling conditions in the first phase, interoperability, as I mentioned, security, data protection, having a look at the end user. In the second phase of the platform, we will continue to support the deployment of the system, but trying to look at also those who will make the investment. Hence, a strong focus on urban, on making use of this technology also to support public transport. You have spoken, Susanne, a lot about also congestion. And I think that, I mean, in Europe, we should be looking at making this system as integrated as possible in a multimodal perspective. So, urban dimension quite strong. But at the same time, we see development in automation moving quite a lot ahead. So what are the challenges from the physical road infrastructure? How should we build this digital infrastructure? Where should the investment come from? What are the needed requirements? Honestly, we don't have the answer, but we hope to find it together. We hope to find it together in this learning by doing process. Today, probably, I hope that in the next presentation, we will learn a lot about the project. Actually, we should not call them project. The pilots that are already happening in Europe. So all this deployment should take place in making the different pieces of the puzzle together. This is our strength. True, there's a lot of fragmentation. But at the same time, we have a lot of very, very different environments where we can test, where we can see the benefit. And not only, I would say, in terms of projection, this is what we have done through the study, but learning exactly in real life what we get out of these technologies. So we hope we can continue to work with our stakeholders, being public authorities or private stakeholders. I see already people smiling, so that means that they are committed. Let's hope so. I think I stop here, and in case you have further questions, we can come during the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll move on to our next speaker, Klaus Shirako, being the CEO of Asfinag.
No problem.
Another part of it. That's the company that's responsible for constructing, operating and tolling the entire primary network of Austria. A little bit different perspective than I think from Australia and from the European Commission, so I think it's quite interesting. You're a former president of ASECAP, so there comes my mistake in, thank you. And you're in the supervisory board of RTCO. Thank you for that, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the very long. Thank you. The introduction is longer than my speech, but no problem at all. Let's make a deal. You don't play with your mobile devices, and you follow, and I will try to be very short. Because yesterday I participated in some sessions, and I think 90% of the people played with their devices, and then it's a pity for them who speak if all they use their mobile feeling getting at home or somewhere else. The title is very interesting, I think so. It's a European payoff, it's not European phenomenon. I'm really sure this connectivity will happen worldwide. And the payoff, it's not a question of payoff or not payoff, it will happen. It must happen, it has to happen. Why this? There are several reasons. The first one, there's no further space for highways and for further areas for roads. So it must be a solution because the number of vehicles will not be reduced, it will increase in the future. It's the same in Europe and in Asia. It's not the same in the US, but also in New York, if you try to build a new highway in New York, not so easy as it sounds. And if you would like to construct a new highway, it's very expensive because all the environment protections and all those laws which exist doesn't make it possible. So you need some instrument to increase the capacity of the roads. Connectivity, a good solution. That's the push factor. The pull factor, like if you look to the children and also to some adults, the people are going to lose their senses. Or they don't watch on, or if they walk on the road, they don't have their eyes open and look somewhere. They all look in the mobile device, following their navigation system, and if it will go in the wrong direction, they will not realize this for hours. So I think in the future it's a must, more or less, because the people are no longer able to organize for themselves. If you hand them over a map, they will not be able to use this map. How north? What's north? Where's south? And I'm sure in 20 years there is no way that the people can really go 5A without this system. This is the second argument. And the third argument, this is pushed by the industry. Marketing, public relations. If you look for McDonald's, it's unbelievable. My son is now 10 years old, but I think Mama, Papa, and McDonald's. Yeah? And maybe if I would have a second children, McDonald's, Papa and Mama maybe. Yeah, you see what is important. The companies realize. And of course, connectivity is a big business because you will get the information. That's the way somewhere. This is the information about the speed limit, and you should stop at the next Burger King to make it transparent. And of course, it's big business, and we all need business because millions, billions of people look for a job. And if there's no job, they're not happy, and then we would have some problems. And so there are three factors why connectivity will be spread very wide and very quick, and there's no way that it will not happen. It will happen, and it's not a project. Claire, you explained very well. It's not a project. It's a good development, and it will be supported by all the mobile phone devices, by the industry. They're not presented today, but the industry, they will push, of course, because it's big business. The car manufacturing industry will push this, and we have to convince all the operators of the highways and the governments and the ministries that they support, because there is a little bit of normally, and I represent this industry, I know what I tell you now, a little bit understanding we are a monopolistic situation and we by ourselves and we don't need the customer, sometimes. And though it's, I think, a very good point if the Commissioner works together with these organizations, with this ministry, to convince them that connectivity is the next step forward. It will happen in any case. Thank you very much. I hope it was short enough and we can have a good and interactive discussion later. Thanks.
Well, thank you. Before you go back to your seat, I'm a little bit curious. I think you as Austria Tech have been investing in a digital infrastructure and in getting quite much on that on the road. What triggered you initially to do so? Because you didn't tell yet.
It's a need. The investment in this digital infrastructure is really the most important one we have. It's a joke in Austria Tech. In the past, we constructed highways and made a very small, like for emergency calls, network. Yeah, now we are building a glass fiber network, this size, king size, and the roads are very small. So we're more or less like a telecommunication provider. Why this? Because in 1 year, for example, we have a very small network, only 2,000 kilometers of highway, and 95% of this highway should be available via video. Why video? We don't watch TV all the time, and not highway TV especially. But if there will be an accident, it's the best information you can get is a picture. And if you can see the Red Cross is there, the police is there, what's going on, then you can give a good information to the customers. Because our benefit as highway operator could be in the future to give the correct information, how long will it last until the highway is available again. Because all the other information is done by Googles of this, all these Uber services or the mobile phone devices, they can say you the traffic jam is so long, you will lose so many minutes, hours or days. But the only information they cannot get is the information there's an accident or a breakdown. How long does it last? When can the highway be reopened again? That's the focus from us. We are specialized for this, availability of the highway. And this is the information we will give to the vehicles in the future. We will give to all the companies which are asking us, and this free of charge. Our understanding is, for us, it's not a business to sell this data because it's a must. It's the same if you will fly to Australia and go to the Qantas corner or to the desk, Qantas desk, and you ask my plane, will it be there? And they will tell you, oh, it costs £5 to get this information. This is not our understanding. Our understanding is you pay for the highway, the toll or the toll stick, it doesn't matter, but you have to pay for the toll, and then you will get all the information you need, and that's the reason why we invest really a lot of money in this new digital infrastructure, and we will hand over this information neutral to all the companies and also to the end consumers which are asking for it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we'll stay in Austria now with our next speaker. Martin Roos is Managing Director of Austria Tech, which is a mobility agency of the Ministry of Transport, I think, working on the strategy towards sustainable transport systems and mobility solutions. And furthermore, you are Secretary General of ITS Austria, and also something in the Supervisory Board of Ertica, I think.
Yes.
Martin, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I think as Klaus has mentioned, it's policy sometimes it's a hurdle. Policy could also be somehow really enabling processes, like Claire has mentioned, the Commission did, with the CTIS Platform. This is very fresh. This is the policy view in Austria on CITS and connectivity. It's our national CITS deployment strategy because, of course, it's so important to have a strong highway operator like ASFINAG who's really forcing the investments and pushing all the partners, sometimes also pushing, of course, the ministry. That's good. Transport and traffic is not stopping at the on and off ramps. So it's going somewhere, coming from somewhere, international cooperation, quite important. But also, what Claire also has mentioned, I think, and this is what we focus on the next step, and how we move towards the cities, how we move towards specific application scenarios, so to say, for freight, for specific purposes. We have to go for that, and this is somehow the underlying principle, and so important also a strong common political commitment in Austria to do that now. It's not just there as a concept, it's there for real. And what we do, or ASFINAG does in the pilots, for instance, I think is so important because it's not something that ASFINAG and the Austrian industry is doing this together in a specific silent corner, but we do it open. We invited everybody, we cooperated via the projects that we funded on a national basis with partners from all over Europe. We teamed up with the French, with Cooperative. I think this was great, and this great. And of course, there's the CITS corridor. It's also great, with Germany, or many Germanys, I have to say, and with the Netherlands. But it's working, and it's there. And I think this is also one of the key messages regarding the CTIS platform and the payoff so far. I think it's now we are still in the learning phase with these first deployments. And the payoff that we all get from it is the common learning. And the common understanding, and to develop the perspectives on who should do what, who has what kind of responsibilities, and who will get what kind of benefits out of those new systems. We also, in the beginning, when we first, I think, invented some middle lanes on the highway or on our roads, we were not thinking on business cases, even not for pedestrian crossing, I would say. There was no business cases specifically, but some people had the idea that this can help. And I think it's somehow the same with CITS and connectivity. And connectivity, I think it's more broader. You also mentioned the digital infrastructure perspective that is there. So it's not only specific connectivity issues, ITS G5, 4G, 5G networks, but it's the whole traffic management thing. It's the high definition maps you need. And then not only for the automated vehicles or highly automated vehicles to come, but also for all the connectivity, but also for the legacy vehicles, it must be interesting. And I think this is the more broader sense on that. And also today, besides this one, our minister, I think right now, it's the end of the press conference, on our national action plan on automated and connected driving. And this leads me also to the thing that the Dutch has put forward in their presidency concerning the Amsterdam Declaration. I think it's so important to bring those two issues together, even if they have other kind of timelines and other kind of timescales, and where we now start really the deployment of the first day services in connectivity and CITS, we are there to start the same learning in automation. And one prerequisite we defined in Austria when we go for automation and testing of automation, not only in highways, also in city scenarios or rural areas, digital infrastructure and connectivity is also a key there to learn. Maybe in the future we will have autonomous vehicles that are not, where some infrastructures are not needed, but in the testing phase it's a prerequisite. And so we build upon the different layers, and so I think bringing all those topics together is one of our core aims, and also kind of an invitation to all the interested parties in Europe to work with us, to team up, to learn, same as we did in the field of CITS, also for the future. And we hope, of course, on the support from the Commission now with the master plan to bring these new topics in there. It's so important. But concerning the deployment, please, let's stay with the first day services, guarantee quality, and having these common learning still there when we deploy the service and measure the quality of the service, because this is the important thing for the users. Thanks.
Thank you. Martin, no, don't be too shy. We've just heard a little bit more about highways and what's happening there. And you very shortly mentioned going for deployment in cities. Can you give me some examples of what you're doing?
We are just teaming up now with our cities, also when we develop the deployment strategies together, so the ministry and our ITS Austria platform, where we have the cities in there, we have the federal countries of Austria in there. We say, okay, we need to define the right measures and see also the different applications that are needed, not only, let's say, our traffic light signal things, there must be more than that, also for the cities. For instance, freight corridors into the cities, like Susan has mentioned. But this has to be developed together with the cities and together with the service providers. So it's not a thing that the ministry or a highway operator or whoever, or we as an agency, we say, oh, this must happen. So it's more really to work on a cooperative and collaborative basis, and to work together with the cities on their real needs and to find common solutions. And of course their traffic management, interactive traffic management procedures, like we for instance discussed in the TM 2.0 platform, they are crucial for that. Okay. That you're able to share your information between traffic management centrals, service providers, and specific user groups.
Okay.
Yeah?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Martin. Thank you. Our last speaker before we start actually the panel discussion is Marie-Christine Esposito from the French Ministry of Ecology, Sustainable Development and Energy. You're working there in international affairs in the ITS office. Before that, you've been working as an R&D in the R&D mission of the state road operator for the Paris region, and I hope you can bring both experiences to the floor here.
I hope so.
Thank you.
So getting European payoff from connectivity. I have to say that that was the first question that we asked ourselves before going into the different projects. What can we get from those projects? So you told Martin about the Scoop project that we started 2 years ago in France. And that's actually the first question that we ask both to the car manufacturers and to the road operators and to the ministry at most. And what we found is that the needs and the payoffs were very different from all the partners in the project. And I can say that we had a lot of discussions. It was difficult to find a compromise between the different partners on this issue. And we are learning to actually find this compromise. And why did we go into this connectivity projects? First, obviously, as a ministry, was to support the companies, so the car manufacturers and also the road operators. And we also support the local authorities that want to improve managing traffic and safety of road users and the safety of road operators as well. I think that connectivity is still at the beginning of all the services that it can bring to road users and to road operators. So we haven't thought about all the services that it can provide. In the CTIS platform, we defined day one services, I think, and day 1.5, if I remember correctly. But there's still day 2 and day 3, and I think we haven't thought about everything that can be done yet with this new technology. What we have found today is that one good benefit yet is that it allows an immediate communication between road operators and road users. That's the first need that road operators expressed, is that they can send directly to vehicles the information that they build actually, and also in the other way is that they get the information directly from the vehicles without any outside sources, and that's one thing that we want to promote within the French ministry. And because we get directly the information from road users, we also want to provide free information to road users directly from road operators, following actually the directive and the delegated act. We get the information from road users, we provide them for free as much as possible. Obviously, we won't limit any new business models that are based on those data, and we can add value to this data and develop new services that could be paid for, actually. What can I say next? The thing is that I think for now we don't have a view on all the business models that can be built yet. We have more questions than answers. For road operators, I think the main view is that it can help communicate better with road users, it can help safety, as I said before, and it can also help, if you view it on the long term, it can help reduce the number of equipments in the roads if we want to. And for car manufacturers, I think they are still trying to find a business model on this connectivity. I think they have in mind that the autonomous vehicles are coming right after, and maybe that's where we're heading. And yes, I think I will stop for now, and we'll answer more questions during the session. Thank you
very much. Thank you. Well, as you can see, we removed the chairs that originally were at the stage because we felt like the panel should be a little bit more interactive and no time to sit down and lay back. So may I please ask my panel members to go to the stage, find a place, you don't have to stick to the plates there, just find a good place, and then we'll head up with our discussion.
Sorry, go ahead.
But while you're all finding a place, I'll just move to back a little bit so I can see what you're actually doing there. We are talking about connectivity, and what none of you have really described, if you're talking about the payoff of connectivity, etc., what do you think is connectivity? What are connected? Can you help me in setting that part of the scene still? Susan, can you kick off?
Yeah, certainly. I think there's a whole range of different levels of connection, and so where we're at is that we're getting a payoff from proven technologies that if we're looking at communication over the mobile network, but then if we're looking at vehicle to vehicle and vehicle to infrastructure, I think this is where we're still exploring what is the right model and how can we get a payoff there. And I think what I'm seeing from governments in Australia is that very much if we're looking at car-to-car communication, then the governments are happy for the manufacturers to take a lead there. But what they're seeing is that if there's going to be an improvement from a safety point of view, or particularly from a productivity point of view and a congestion easing point of view, it's going to have to be vehicle to infrastructure, and that's where government are going to play an active role, and that's where they're really interested.
Okay, thank you. And Martin, I see you nodding at that answer. You're entirely agreeing on this?
Absolutely, because I think the different perspectives are so many, I would say. Of course, we started the discussion in the session more on the CTIS specific connectivity issues, I would say. But there are, in a broader sense, connectivity is also, okay, where is the connectivity discussion ends and where does other discussions have to start on digital transport infrastructure, because digital transport infrastructure is more than connectivity. Mobility as a service is based on connectivity, but not only on connectivity of users or infrastructure, somehow all together, that we learn and bring a more also financing perspective into there. Automation also, connectivity for automation we see is important, but also you have to connect the different sensors. Also this is connectivity. So what do we understand? I think there's no common understanding on connectivity. We just, I think, all have the same picture on how that it's, of course, it's somehow in the center, and because it's somehow in the center and so many ways on connectivity are out there, and also so many technologies are out there, we are also confused. And with this confusion, we are somehow stuck concerning our investment priorities than concerning connectivity issues.
Okay, I'm afraid that we could have then the rest of the session just trying to define connectivity, but I think for setting the scene, we should be there unless any one of you entirely disagrees. I don't see that happening. Thanks for that. Then we're talking about a payoff, and you could think in euros or pounds or whatever you like to think of, but I think a payoff should be definitely more than that. I think most of your organizations are not primarily interested in making the money. So what I would like to know from all of you, and I move left to right for the audience, is what, from your perspective, from your organization, knowing that the industry is missing in this panel, but from your organization, what would be a payoff that you would really like to achieve? And just a couple of sentences, please.
Very, very easy explained. As a road operator, it's very clear, and it's only one answer was the correct one: to reduce the number of accidents. Because it's easy. Connectivity is to replace the senses of the human beings and to get more information. And if you combine this, the vehicles which will be much more safe than in the past it was, and so the number of death and fatigues and so on will be reduced by a large number in the future. That's the big payoff for the road operators.
Thank you. It's a very clear answer. Thank you. Marie-Christine.
I talked about it a bit during my speech before, but I guess the first one is obviously the road safety, either for road users, but also for I insist on this one for also operating agents on the field who intervene during accidents and who protect the areas, and to let the road users know that they are there. That's a kind of important use case that we developed within the project. So security, obviously. The second one would be the information that we can get from the vehicles, obviously. And then, as I said before, the direct communication between users and operators to get more control on the information, how it's spread out.
Okay.
And finally, I was very short. Finally, would be the different, as I said before, the reduce maybe the costs of equipment on the roads if we don't need as much as before.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Susan.
fantastic.
Susan, I know you represent actually quite a lot of organizations within ITS Australia, so maybe you can use that perspective.
Yeah, certainly I was going to suggest that, so in Australia we've done some surveys of, what are the biggest issues that the community want to see addressed. And number one is health, quite, not surprisingly, so safety is a major issue. But number two on their list of issues to be addressed is congestion. So these are voters that are telling our politicians that, our transport is critical to our lives and to the livability of our cities and how we experience our cities. So I think safety is critical, but certainly that congestion management, easing congestion, but I think beyond that there's a real opportunity with connectivity to also look at making public transport more usable, making it come on demand, making it more comfortable and a more pleasant experience for commuters. So I think that there's a sort of a great opportunity to look at all of those solutions to make the journeys that people have every day more pleasant and enjoy their lives more.
Thank you. Claire.
Same here. Road safety, congestion, making cities more livable, I would say in general, so covering also the congestion element for sure. One thing I need to add, in the preparation of a master plan based on the work of the CTIS Platform, we are running a public consultation, which is also targeting these questions. So in case you want to give your impression, your advice, please help us. It's important to have the views of everyone. And also I would just add, it's true that we don't want to make in the first place money, but still, we have good industries in Europe. We want just to promote them a little bit.
Yeah.
Thank you. Martin.
I also agree concerning really the transport sector itself. It's, of course, it's safety and efficiency gains, but also it could have an impact on decarbonization if you see adaptive powertrains, for instance, that are connected. And so they will bring benefits to the vehicles itself. And concerning safety, of course, in the next phase also, we have maybe a shift from passive safety elements to active safety elements via this new technology. So there is a lot of payoff in there. But I also think, like Claire had said, but as we are not only an agency of a Ministry of Transport, but this Ministry of Transport is also the Ministry of Innovation and Technology. So it's about the labor market, it's about job creation, it's about value creation, and it's about maybe a new kind of ecosystem for mobility that we somehow change with these things, the way on how we look towards responsibilities in the transport sector, and say bringing more dynamic into this whole sector and making it more efficient as a whole.
Yep. Thank you, Susan.
I was going to say, from just another perspective in terms of the way that people are using connectivity, we're talking about sort of some of the examples of some of the developments or the commercial developments and industry developments in Australia. One of our companies in telematics have generated a connected mobility app. So this is really around the apps, but it's been incredibly effective in terms of reaching out through the automobile club. So it's widespread throughout Australia. They've now penetrated the US market and they're dealing with 3 major automobile companies in Australia. So I think what we're seeing is that from a consumer point of view, they're really attracted just to the convenience. Let's make my life easier. Where can I find a car park? Where's the best fuel? Really fundamental things that consumers are engaging with. And this has got penetration over tens of millions of people. Where's my car? Where did I leave my car? Why is it? What's wrong with it? So diagnostic tools. So I think connectivity is really opening up, and it's really we've got our phones at the moment, but it's really only just starting to get our cars connected, and I think so. Consumers are hungry for that convenience. Lives are so busy; they're looking for those attributes as well.
Thank you for adding that. We have been talking about the CTIS platform, and as you might know, it's going to the second phase, and that raises, of course, quite some expectations of what's going to happen there. And I'm going to ask you, what are your expectations for the second phase of the CTIS platform? And in the end, Claire is going to respond to it.
To be grilled.
Yes. Martin, I just go now from the right to the left this time.
The expectations, I think we really should keep the same momentum that we had in the first phase. And this, for us, also it was a new way on working with the Commission, and that the Commission itself, they coordinated amongst themselves. So there was a clear lead by DG Move, but all the others participated. We should follow this principle. It was a good principle, I have to say. The other thing that we expect, of course, also we have to bring the automation aspects in there, and the more also service aspects in there for traffic management purposes and so on. So discuss also about the scenarios and the applications, and not only about the technologies. And I think this is one of our perspectives that we really should handle there.
Okay, good. I don't see too many surprises with Claire yet, but I'm going to skip you and go to Susan now first.
Well, I would have to talk about particular Australian examples in that case. So we're very much looking at rolling out a CTIS platform. Queensland are taking a lead in that space at the moment, and looking at working with industry to come up with certain applications. So the government is looking to provide the platform and the security and the framework, but then looking for industry partners to deliver applications on that, and looking for partners with autonomous vehicles as well to participate in that. So really bringing it to life in Australia, I think, as it was talked about the other day in the executive session, let's give it a go, let's see what works, and then we can learn from there and expand from there.
Yeah, thank you. Marie-Christine, your expectations for the second stage?
Yeah, I think that now the CTIS platform should really have in mind that there's a need to deploy quite fast afterwards to get the payoff, because we need a lot of vehicles on the road to actually have the payoff. And to do that, I think we talked a bit about that yesterday. There's some key points that need to be tackled. One of them is the security. With a certificate policy, for example, or other issues like that. And another is privacy of road users, because that's a main point to be dealt with, because there will be a lot of data all around, and we need to make sure that the privacy is kept in mind.
Thank you.
We have two focuses. It's very clear, and we have an own department, a unit following this CTIS platform. And we always take care that it's not a project for the project for the project. You see the point? They play like a gambling with Lego or with Playmobil, and the customer never feels it. But it's a nice game to play for years or for decades. So we always keep an eye that the customer has to feel it, what's going on. And to avoid that, maybe Google and Samsung, they're making the business and we are playing Lego. That's the first focus. The second one is that the legal steps should be taken also. My feeling is a little bit that the governments are not quick enough, because there are some legal restrictions and limitations, and some of the vehicles which are available are more or less illegal if you start these automatic applications, and that's not good, because all those applications are in favor of safety and of the people, and then the laws don't follow. So we should also have really keep an intensive eye on this and motivate the European Parliament and international Wiener Abkommen. I think it's worldwide very important, which was agreed in 1968 for all the states. And this should be changed, modified. There are some steps forward, but this is also a very important step forward, not to get a big problem with some insurance companies and some other developments. We should not be astonished some years later.
Thank you. Well, there are quite some expectations to live up with there, isn't it?
How much minutes I have to answer? Because I have a bit to say now. So I did not play a lot with Playmobil when I was young, but a lot with Lego. You know, and Lego is you put this piece all together, and every piece is important. So I think the CTIS platform is that it's not Playmobil, it's Lego. and then I add here, because there was a lot about public authorities. I mean, what we made clear when we started all this journey is that we had understood, okay? We would not come as we used to come with legislation, maybe maybe too far from reality. So that was point taken. But at the same time, what we said, and I have sometimes the impression, at least some part of the industry do not hear it quite well, that we also have some expectation for the private sector. So in order to have legislation coming at the right time, you also need to have, I would say, an engagement, a strong engagement on good cooperation amongst ourselves. And then coming about, we have to act now. I think we have all a deadline now. Wasn't it 2019? Has not the automotive industry said that they intend to deploy by 2019? So that's our roadmap. Not set by the Commission, a voluntary agreement from the sector. So let's make it. Okay, we might be a bit innovative in the way we are doing. So maybe we don't give legal certainty tomorrow, but we can work together on creating this legal certainty.
Stop. Thank you. Thank you. Cool. We've been talking on a higher level. Now I'd like to go down to the road and towards what you see actually on the road, to learn from what's going on already. Can you give some examples of what you think are successful systems or services based on connectivity that are actually on the road? So not in trials, but really on the road. Susan, could you start that?
Yeah, so I sort of tried to give an overview of some of those within the Australian context, so very much, and I think that getting the payoff is quite an interesting message in that trying to look at niche applications to justify the rollout of the technology. So I think Paul Gray, the Chief Executive at Coda Wireless, talks about intended consequences. So things like this freight priority system, it means that we need a whole range of devices to be deployed, and then they're ready, so that when vehicles come on the road, the early adopters, get the benefits of that technology as well, and we can start to add applications to those devices as well. So I think looking at prioritising and the rollout approaches is quite an interesting, it's really a critical way that governments can support the rollout of technology for these solutions. And I talked about in telematics and their connected club solutions. So, again, depending on what level of connectivity we're talking about, is those that are already out there, and the ones that we're using every day and aren't so exciting to talk about, versus the connected freight. We've got pilot deployments happening in Queensland at the moment, and some of those situations.
Okay, thank you. Martin, what can you see for examples?
I think we have good examples, but it's like Susan has said, the more complex one, also integrating, of course, the vehicle or really CITS technologies, these are trials, these are pilots of what we do, and we learn and test there, even on a large scale. But on the other hand, there are at Asfinag your truck parking services that you have installed now. I think this is a pretty good example.
Okay.
It's easy, it's somehow easy cheesy, but you have to organize the processes, and this is done. What we do with the DATEX2 nodes in the Crocodile project with Eastern Europe, next thing. It's out there. It's really the cooperation of all the road operators dealing with the same data, same processes. I think this is a good example for cooperation, but not for the, let's say, more extensive technology or more more mature technology level. So it's the easy stuff we do already. Also on travel information and multimodal information, there's a very good cooperation of all stakeholders in Austria, and we're now bringing this across border to link the services with our neighboring countries. This is happening.
Okay.
So a lot of things out there, but a much longer way to go, I think.
Okay. We'll come back to that later on. Yes, Claire.
Just a few words to say that indeed, if I had to answer, I would have also mentioned these ITS corridors across Europe. So Crocodile is certainly one of them, but we have a lot of other ones where indeed, in the end, we always said it in the beginning, it's not, the issue is not technology. The main issue is setting up the right cooperation framework. And these EU corridors, if you want, across Europe are very much, let's say, of a strength. We see a lot of representatives here. We are managing them with the help of the INEA, the Agency for Network and Innovation. So it's, again, best practices. Now we just need to expand, let's say, now we have the bones. We just need to make sure that we have a bit of flesh next to the bones.
Okay.
We have some interesting learnings from a major freight corridor, a connected freight corridor in Australia. So this goes from Sydney down a steep escarpment to a port area. So we've got heavy vehicles going down a very steep winding road into a port mixed with light vehicles. So again, we've focused on our freight vehicles, and they've got connected vehicle technology. But what we're finding is that there are particular challenges in there over the positioning in particular. So the size of the vehicles, these are what we call super B doubles, so 2 40-foot containers. And the connected vehicle technology is actually not that effective, because you would be halfway through the vehicle before you got the emergency brake light if you're travelling up behind. And also the steepness of the terrain. So part of the reason for choosing this corridor was around these particular challenges. But what we're seeing is that as vehicles are heading uphill and following a vehicle behind, they're not getting the signal of the vehicle up ahead, because it's anticipating that must be on a bridge because it's too high. So I think there are still some learnings in this space. So there are some great payoff opportunities, but we still need to go step by step in this area.
Thank you. I was up to ask you about some lessons learned from the successful deployed systems, but you've already answered quite some of them together. So the cooperation of several parties to get things rolling and to get across borders also are things that you have said. Do you think that once we have established it, or now that we are establishing it with the CITS corridors, for instance, that the deployment of new systems will be going much faster? Klaus?
I'm convinced it will be faster and faster. If you see the mobile devices, if it's now half a year old, it's very old. You should have changed it quarterly. And so we should also find good solutions for the vehicles. How can this be changed? Because if the navigation system in the vehicle is 5 years old, it's more or less like a 50 years old vehicle in relationship, how old it is. For us, and it's the same like in your country, our main focus for this is the heavy vehicle, as you told, with the parking spaces. Why this? Because we have the phenomenon in Austria that more than 50% of the truck drivers don't speak German, because they don't have an Austrian license plate number. A lot of people with foreign languages. So to give them some information via broadcast in German is really a waste of time and energy. So if there's any chance to keep them informed in their mother tongue, or at least in Russian, most of the people speak Russian from the history, then it's a good chance. And so you have this advantage to use these devices for other languages. and to keep them informed. And it's their working place, they're very professional. And the third focus, because they're sleeping 50% of the time, driving the vehicle because it's so boring. And if you close a lane, normally it's the fact that they don't realize this, and then it makes push. And the truck accident is almost a big problem, because it's not so easy to handle this, or for the driver and for all the people who are involved. And so our special focus are the heavy vehicles. How can we keep them informed? And how can we make it easier for them to get the correct information, to avoid accidents, and to make the highway available?
Thank you. Marie-Christine, how do you see it in France?
Could you repeat the question? Sorry.
Sorry, if this further cooperation with all the relevant parties is now getting established, if the deployment is going to speed up?
Yeah, I remember this. I think that it's quite different than actually smartphones, and because cars are a bigger investment, obviously, than a smartphone, even if it's quite expensive now. But I think if we want to have a fast deployment on cars, it's different for freight, I guess. But for cars, I think there should be some regulatory some acts, some regulatory laws to be made to make sure that the users have to be equipped if we want to go fast, I think.
Okay.
But because it takes quite a long time to renew a whole fleet of vehicles.
Okay, thank you. If we're talking about the payoff of those new systems and services, do we have tools to validate the benefits of those new systems? Do we have any clue of what those systems bring to us? Claire, do you have any clue?
So through this project that we are trying to we have funded, and hopefully we are funding a lot more in the very soon, very near future. We are also trying to get to a common methodologies in terms of evaluation. We are trying to do that at European level. We are also talking to the international partners to try to agree. In the end, I mean, as much as we have projects, there are not that many at the same time. So the experience we have, we really need to have a common understanding. Coming back to the CTIS platform, I must tell you that, let's say, a lot of the work in the first phase was only about making sure that when we were using Word, we were understanding each other. The same goes with the figures. So it's quite an important challenge, and it is as much as important as making the policy, I would say.
Yeah, thank you. Martin, if you are talking about involving cities more into this deployment, how are you going to convince cities, and would you use such evaluation tools to do so?
If they are there in a consistent way, we could use them. But I think actually they are not. Because the one thing we are working on concerning KPIs is, or getting evidence, so to say, is on working on the system performance itself, to validate in the end and test all the different services and to assure the quality of the service and how they are going to transmit it. So you need the whole chain, you need the system performance, but also the specific HMIs to evaluate then on how the user and customer and how they reflect on those things. And then you get the potential impact that it could have and should have. And so to use it then, again, it's more than back to the application on what a public authority or a city as a traffic management center in the city and how they would use this information and what kind of different aspects they can use if they install specific systems and services. So I think it's a broad variety. This is one thing. There are commonalities, yes, but actually totally different kind of things. And I think the first things also there is start with specific corridors like Susan has mentioned. I think this is always what we already did concerning signal phase timing in crossroads and so on. I think there are good good learnings, but you can't trust the figures up to now, I have to say. There are some, under some certainties, these figures might be true.
Or you don't know how to interpret the figures.
Or how you interpret it. So it's still more anecdotes than real data. Somehow.
So there's definitely a need for it.
But there's a need, but still, nevertheless, we have them. It's still about telling the story that it has the potential, and it's out there. And even with these kind of first assumptions that we see out of modeling and so on, there's good perspectives. Yeah, and even if we don't have the real data, and we have to run for it.
Thank you. Marie-Christine, can you add?
Yes, that's a very good question that we are trying very hard to answer right now in Scoop, actually, how to evaluate the impacts of those projects. And I have to say that the main difficulty for us is to manage to estimate the real impacts compared to how many vehicles we actually have on the roads. Because this kind of system works on cooperative systems, obviously, from different users. And if we don't have enough, it's difficult to actually have answers to all if it answers the needs, the initial needs. But we are building them. We are trying to find models, as you said, and to prove to the European Commission that it works.
Okay.
And, but it's actually, I have to say that it's actually not easy because we have to gather a lot of data to do that. We have to make sure that it's still private, the data. And for some use cases, it's actually very hard. We are not going to provoke accidents to make sure that it helps improve safety, obviously. So,
yeah. Okay. Claire, hearing this, is this part of the learning by doing process that you're trying to have?
For sure. But I think, this learning by doing encompasses a lot of things. So for sure, it's getting the feedback in terms of the benefit. But it's also, for me, very much about, Marie-Christine talked a bit about security. We are discussing with some of you in the room of how to establish the system. And we don't, I think all of us do not know exactly how to go ahead with this. So we feel it, but we don't have the holy truth. Yeah. So indeed we need the project to then retest. Does it work the way we are establishing things?
Okay, thank you. Now I'm going to do a little bit of an exercise, and you didn't know about this yet, but we're going to do it anyway. So welcome everyone. We are now at the ITS in Strasbourg. Yes, welcome panel members. Nice to have you here. I'll skip the introductions. If you look back to the discussion we had last year in Glasgow, what has changed since then? Completely. What do you see? Klaus, can you start?
Yeah, I hope so that I can start, and then we will ask the audience. So you can think about how to be astonished. I think we will see more applications, and we will see what is used. And so, Claire, you spoke about the holy truth. I'm really convinced that there is no holy truth. Look for the people. On the one hand side, we spoke yesterday about Facebook, and some people, I'm going to the restaurant, eating now spaghetti, and some other people don't like to give the mobile phone number. So the society is really splitting up from very transparent, open, nude, permanent, to fully covered with close a lot. And so I think also for all these applications, there will be some people and some companies which will use all these modern benefits, and those maybe which are traveling around without giving some receipts, or they don't want to open this very transparent. And so I think we should be prepared for both. We should be prepared for the companies, so that for the people who would like to get this information, and also we should also have some solutions for those who are not willing to open it. But the market and realization will show what is going on. But I think there's a lady in the first.
Yes, I have a question. Do you have an opportunity as an audience to ask?
Normally no, but if you whisper the question to my ear, then I should, yeah.
Well, one of your panelists talked about data earlier.
Yeah.
Everybody understands that data will increasingly be monetized and have great value, particularly in the context of greater connectivity. My question is, given,
But we're still in 2017 now.
yes, that's fine.
Yeah, okay.
The more we move forward, the more data has value. How have each of your jurisdictions decided to deal with how you're going to be monetizing that value of the data? Who owns it? Who can use it? Who has access to it? And how?
Let's make a second workshop, I think so.
There's a really big questions and a quick answers to it, because it's a really a big question.
Because
It is.
to me, it is key, a focal point of connectivity, right?
True.
Yeah, but I think, from my point of view, nobody knows at the moment in detail for all the connectivity. But if you are, for example, in Facebook, you don't know what will be used some years later from this data. If you use WhatsApp, it's the same in yellow, you showed. Or it's the same, as you never know in detail. But I think the courts will protect the customers and the consumers. And if some companies try to sell the data in a big business, they will get some problems. If, for example, if BMW or Audi would like to sell this data, I think it's not a good business model for them. If the Vodafone would like to sell this, it's also not a good business model. This will be collected in itself, because for the Google, if Google goes on the market and sell the data, I think it's really a bad situation for them. And so I think it's not a big fear in this business. But we will, in 1 year later, we will be more solutions, and we will see what the customers will use, buy by themselves, and what will be in reality. And for us, it's more equipment to give information concerning the driving flow and which lanes are available and which lanes are closed at the highway.
Well, thank you. Thank you for opening also the door to go back to the future, to 2017, because Marie-Christine, you didn't yet have the chance to answer what you have seen changed in the last year.
I hope that
Since
we will
Glasgow.
have more projects funded next year.
A few weeks more, please.
But yeah, to have the availability to test new use cases and to see what more payoff we can have on this technology actually. And yeah, I think we will still be very hard working actually on the deployment on the project and the new specification. There's one thing that we are quite working on right now is the hybridation between cellular technology and ITS G5, and I hope that by next year we can have some interesting answers, maybe not answers, but interesting issues to be brought up by that in terms of because in terms of business models, this is a big. I think that's a big point to be dealt with.
Thank you. Susan, is there any celebration for you for over a year of what has been
Yes,
achieved?
so certainly. Well, over a year we've had a World Congress in Australia, so there'll be a lot more energy and a lot more enthusiasm. But we're also, in 2017, we will have an iMove Cooperative Research Centre, which will be a consortium with industry players, large industry players in the ITS space, government players and research and academics. So instead of having all of these organisations working independently, they will be incentivised to work together on really significant projects. And I think it has a really interesting opportunity around the data sharing area as well. So if we're going to solve congestion challenges, we need, we've got private road owners, we've got public roads. How are we going to share that data together to make sure that we get the best results for the community and for the economy of the jurisdictions as well? So I think what we might well see is that there'll be jurisdictions that have an environment that supports effective sharing of data and is an effective model. and they are going to be the true smart cities, because I think connectivity is really going to drive that. And then you might have others that are less effective in moving forward, and that you'll probably be able to come into a city and see that difference in terms of how effective it is.
Okay, thank you. Claire?
So maybe I'll answer on the access to data, because I think it's an important question actually. So in the context of the CTIS platform, this question was discussed. I must admit we did not end it where I wanted to land. We had agreed a list of principles that should, be applied when access is provided, which is the informed consent of the data subject. It is about security, making sure that you access, let's say, the data from the vehicle, but you do not make the vehicle less safe. But it's also a lot about the data economy. Here, and I think Martin mentioned it quite a lot in all his intervention, it's about transport, but it's a lot more than only the transport sector. So while we are creating new avenues and we are talking about competitiveness, it's about, again, making sure that a lot of different components of the industry, the industry is profiting from it, while providing the services that the customer wants. So I think that making sure that we have the right ecosystem from scratch is absolutely a priority. So I mentioned we did not get where we wanted, so we had two different type of stakeholders not really agreeing among themselves. I still think that also, let's say, when it comes to sharing data from private to public, it is not that easy. We hear a lot of people saying, yeah, but do I then need to have contract with each and every car manufacturers? How will I handle it? So again, I come back to my point. Yes, you want public sector to be different, but maybe also public transport sector does not want to be faced with a lot of administrative burden. So we need to think about how to make it happen in the most effective manner.
Thank you. Martin, if I transform you to 2017, and how do you look back in the last year?
One, I have to say, in 2017, data itself doesn't have a value. It's the purpose behind the data that makes the value and the service, what I'm using it for. And I think this is the discussion. It's, of course, there's a data economy, but the data economy is searching for purposes, no matter if it's Google or whoever. So I think this is, of course, this is a crucial discussion that we need, but it's not only the data elements and an open data discussion, whether private, personal, company data, public data, whatever, but it's the services. So what we do actually, or we try to discuss and bring forward, is more the linking of services than just only accessing data without maybe having the wrong purpose in mind to use the data in the right way. And the other thing what I see is the team working on CITS deployment has got bigger by massive funding from the Commission. No, by some funding. I think this is important. But what's more important than having also this kind of deployment steps is that we were able to set up during the last year the right environments for common learning experiences. And I think this is important, to have a more systematic approach on that, on really lab situations that we establish, to have open access and exchange things between industry and operators. And we did a major step forward last year.
Very nice, very nice. I look forward to having made that step jointly. Thank you. I asked our speakers going towards conclusion of the session to think about the three main actions needed now to get new mobility services based on connectivity actually on the road, getting them working and get some payoff in Europe from it. And well, that's the question to you as panelists, and I'm asking you to answer it in the order that you also appeared on the stage. So Susan, you may kick off.
Sorry, I lost my concentration.
Sorry,
It's a long time up here.
The three main actions that you think are needed now to get systems on the road and to get a payoff from it.
I think I think the trials are important. We need to learn by doing. I think that we need, in Australia, we need government investment to roll out the foundation infrastructure. So looking at the hotspots in the network and how we can start to have these early deployments, so that early deployments from the light vehicle sector have something to reach out to. And I think we need a space for greater collaboration. There is a lot happening, particularly in the Australian context, and I see there's a great platform in Europe for that collaboration. But just to make sure that there's the learnings in one place become shared learning, so everyone gets lifted together. That would be my three.
Thank you. Thank you. Claire?
Cooperation, 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 and then answering security and data protection.
Okay. Good. Klaus?
I will make a donation to you, 2 minutes for your questions. It's for you.
Well, it's a concluding remark. So
But I think it would be fair because there's a microphone and we should ask.
that's true, but it's also already 10:30.
Thank you for your patience. Thanks a lot.
But
And
I
not using a mobile device.
I think it's no problem to answer any questions afterwards, but I'd like to wrap it up jointly, and then whoever wants further questions, you're most welcome. But
You will give
no,
the chance to the audience.
well, afterwards, after concluding. Yeah.
I see. So, 3 major developments. You will have more information, more devices. I hope the project will come to the floor. It will be realized, not only played with Lego and not Playmobil, but it will be used. And I hope we can convince the ministries and especially the road operators to make really a step forward, because they're not so interested normally because they don't see the business case. All the others see the business case, and those associations, organizations have to be motivated via different influences, maybe in Europe by the Commissioner and maybe by international pressure by some other companies.
Thank you. Martin?
I think I've said it before, it's really keep the momentum with the platform and the master plan on where we have to have this exchange on a strategic level, data issues and so on, what's in there, but then of course teaming up amongst the member states. So it's not, but also having, let's say, policy, as Klaus had said, also policy and the road operators more into the common strategic discussion, but really to have then the hands-on trial and these kind of learning experiments, and not only on stretches of 10 kilometers, but really on whole corridors with common services that are understandable. And what I personally see is really freight is important, but also the linkage then in the general discussion with decarbonization. This is too less emphasized, I have to say, that we have to work on that, not only on safety issues, because when you compare the deaths in Europe, I think 25,000 in road safety, and then you take the fatalities because of environmental aspects or problems in Europe, I think there are 600,000, then you see the main problem.
But then we need the help of the member states also in getting figures in terms of KPI.
Absolutely.
And the discussion is not that easy on that aspect.
Absolutely, I fully agree on that. But this is, I think it's somehow needed.
True. Thank you for that. Marika Singh.
I have nothing much to add compared to what the others said. I guess continue the deployment, learning by doing, with new kinds of road operators as well. In France, we have many road operators, so it'd be good to implicate them in this new technology. We have to move forward with the standardization, I guess. That's important to deploy new services, because we have ideas, but we need harmonization to make sure that they can be deployed, and to do that we need proper standardization. And the third one would be continue at European level, I guess, the CTIS platform, the answers that we talked about, security, privacy, access.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm not going to summarize visions that I have now at the end, but I think what we can see from the whole session is that we see that a lot of things have been done in trials, but we see the trials as a learning by doing that we have to bring further now to the road. And a key will be there. I heard cooperation, cooperation, cooperation. It was one of the final statements, but it was also through the whole discussion all the time, I think. So it will be key to get there. What we also have seen that there will be an increasing focus in also getting it working in cities, not only in highways, but making the translation towards cities as well. And data handling, data security, storage, access, sharing, how to deal with that is going to be critical, but also a key factor for success there. And what it brought also along is that it's important to have the non-transport industry involved and to jointly create a very healthy ecosystem to get there. One of the very fine things that I've found in the discussion with you is that you have sometimes different opinions, different views on what's the payoff of connectivity. I find it very interesting, very nice. Now we'll conclude with summarizing some of the things that you have said being the payoff of connectivity. Reducing accidents, improving safety, including the safety for operators on the road, getting the information from vehicles, but also have a control of the information, reduce the cost of the infrastructure, reduce, of course, also congestion, work on decarbonization, and I think two key elements will be also the livable cities and a strong European industry creating also jobs. That being a wrap-up of what we think is payoff from connectivity and how to get there. Thank you very much for all your work here. Thank you for your visions and for being here. Thank you very much. And thank you. It is ended, so if you have any questions to them, just